Hello, and thank you for your interest in the PII Vault plugin for Domo Workbench. In this video, we're going to show you how to set up and configure the PII Vault Transform Plugin to redact PII from your source data as it goes through Workbench and up into Domo. Let's go ahead and take a look at a job. We have a job here that is pulling data from a local database. Check out the query. Simple select statement from a view. However, what is highlighted here is that we are ordering the data by the unique key to the individual. This is critical for performance. The way Workbench works is we get every record one at a time. So we need to have this in order so that we can restrict the number of calls to only once per individual. Now that we've saved that, let's go ahead and add the transform plugin. Pull down the transform and you'll see the PII Vault. If that's not there, we have another video on how to configure Workbench and add the PII Vault plugins. Click the plus sign and take a look at the dialog where we get everything set up. There's three different sections here. The first is whether or not you are going to mask or redact the data. Redacting, when we set the fields up as and highlight them as PII, and we want those values to not go to Domo, those values will be completely blanked out. We said mask, they would be replaced with anonymous values. The second section we need to do is to go in and configure the PII Vault connection parameters. These should be provided to you by the IT resource who set up the vault. We'll go ahead and paste them in. And once we have that, we'll be able to set up the schema. Go ahead and paste those. Now that they're all in there, I test the connection, it verifies my credentials, and even tells me what version of the vault I'm running. Great, we're ready to move on. The last step is to configure the schema. On this window, we have each of the columns that are defined in the schema. We need to go through and specify which ones are PII and what we want to do with them. Now, as we mentioned earlier, there is one column that is the unique key to the individual. Every time the transform plugin and the PII Vault see data from that account with this value to identify an individual, you will always get back the same polyanonymous ID. We'll show you that when we're done with the configuration. We need to go through and define what other fields are PII and what kind of PII they are. This allows data coming from different sources to be combined at the individual level within Domo without ever loading any of that PII into Domo. So I'm going to go through and just hit the first letter of each of those classification names to speed things up just a little bit. Now, when we get down to the social security number, we have a couple of options. The social security number is an alternate key. It is a secondary value that we could use to identify this person, either whole or in part. You can configure those inside the PII Vault configuration. When you do that, as part of this list, there will be an alternate key, SSN. We could use that. If you don't have it, and in this case, we're going to pretend we don't, we have the alternate key value of SSN, and we need to say what type of key it is. In this case, that value, SSN, is inside this column. So we have inside the data the key type as well as the key value. All right, so now we're going to move on and finish setting up the address. And let's put that as the address and the zip code. All right. Now, if you happen to have multiple addresses or phone numbers or email addresses in your data, the Vault needs to know how to separate them and how to group them. So for instance, if you had a home address and a business address, how would the Vault know which city is the home address and which one is the work address? It does it with the group column. You would set one set of values with a group, and then for the other set, for instance, the work address, each of the work address items would have a different value from what you have for the home address. All right, final thing to set up is what data is going to go into Domo and what's going to be redacted. In this case, we want the member number to go into Domo. It's up to you whether you do or not. But we're going to redact the first name, last name, phone number, email, date of birth, certainly the social security number, and the street address. We're leaving gender, city, state, and zip as fields that are not redacted because we may want to use those for analytics and reporting. So the schema is unvalidated. We're going to check and make sure all the rules have been passed. We're all good. Click OK. We can see the update there. We apply and we save those. Now, when we preview the data, it'll be pulled from the database and run through the Transform plugin. The values that we identified as redacting are all blanked out. In a later version of Workbench, they'll just not be in here. They'll be completely removed. But for now, they're nulled out. The rest of the data that we had is not being redacted, whether it be PII or non-PII data, is going to go through into Domo. There's also an additional field here called polyanonymous ID or poly ID. The value of the poly ID is every data set that you load into Domo with that account ID and this value, this member number as the unique key will always get the same poly ID. So you can link data from the same source in different data sets together at the individual level without ever loading any PII in there. Well, that's it. That's how you do the Transform plugin. I hope you enjoy it, and it opens up a whole new world of reporting for you in Domo.